We have already been talking about identities, about the lack of collective identities and the dominance of personal. And now we want to share the first results. So we have not finished yet.
Можно помочь? Обычно F5, но не работает. Просто...
Я сделал.
О, отлично.
Have not finished yet our analysis, but we just would like to share the very first results. So our object of studying the same groups we reported previously, and why friendship? Our research is about how private, especially friendship networks, interact with public activist networks within our newly created local movements. So, why it is important to study the role of friendship networks in political mobilization? Many political scientists and sociologists, and Dugma Kadam, one of the most prominent among them, showed that in some cases, as Maxim Aryakov also said, the presence of close friends inside protest movement is crucially important to remain mobilized. And McAdam, in his research on civil rights movement in the United States, showed that the presence of close friends inside the movement was even more important than ideology, identities, and so on. So he showed that if an activist had many close friends inside the movement, he continued to be activist, and if he didn't have, and alternatively had the most of his or her friends outside the movement, he or she disengaged. But we have the problem in Russia, because in Russia we have a very special friendship. What is Russian friendship? We suppose that Russian friendship in its contemporary form was created in the late Soviet era, and Russian friendship was the most important institution of so-called public-private sphere. Many researchers, and for example, Voronkov and Zdravomyslova, argued that it's impossible to consider Soviet society in terms of public in private sphere, as it was suggested by, for example, Habermas or Hannah Arendt, because why? Because we didn't have privacy in Western sense in Russia, and private sphere in the Soviet Union was created as contrr-public, but at the same time this contrr-public sphere was located in the kitchens and was becoming more and more depoliticized. So and Voronkov proposed the term of public-private sphere. It just means that people constructed this collective private sphere in opposition to Communist Party, to official public sphere. But at the same time, very soon, people came to the conclusion that Soviet leaders and those who struggle against them are the same type of people. So the only possibility to be outside this hypocritical Soviet public sphere is to create apolitical, anti-political, private but very collective sphere. And Howard, who did his research in Russia in 2003, argued that Russian people did not participate in social movements because this friendship, which remains the same institution of private but collective sphere, is substitution of civil society. So people don't need comrades because they have their private collectivity in the form of friendship. So, our questions. How do friendship and activist networks interact in new local movements? And what is the role of friendship in the group's success? So, I think we don't need to repeat the description of our groups, of our local movements, because we have already done it. So, about method. After we did the interviews with participants of this movement, we decided to do the second failed work and to investigate their private and public networks. Here we can see which questions we ask them. For instance, indicate people whom you would name as your close friends, what their education, etc., etc. And we asked this question about, so firstly we asked to name all friends and then all comrades from the movement. And then we asked many questions about each of them. It was crucially important because, for example, when we previously asked just, do you discuss with friends politics? They could answer yes. If it's yes, we discussed and we had no problem with it, so our friends support us. But when you start to ask about each of them, so do you discuss usually politics with this guy and with this? And did you try to ask him to help you in political activity, or did you try to involve him? So here we see some crucial details and can make more detailed conclusions.
Okay, I will briefly describe all our three groups, and so the first one, it's a group, small. We can say that these groups, in a certain sense, in a crisis, because during last year, less participants have been involved in this group. But with this new, with the appearance of Navalny, they again became a little bit more active. And so the activities are, in a certain sense, alive. And on the picture, I tried to visualize these networks. It's not the full network of our local group, it's ego networks. And red nodes are people that are participating in groups, so it's political friends, and blue ones are just private friends. In the second group, it's also not too big. It's we could take about 5 or 7 interviewers, but it is almost all the active participants, and this group are not also in its best state now, because the problems are becoming less important and less interesting for the citizens living in this area. And the final group, we can say, from our point of view, it's one of the most active and successful ones now, because they have much more participants. They had resources. For example, they had a local newspaper. It's very critical, and it gives such resources as building, informational resource, and this group are, to our mind, are the most active in the interaction with citizens of this city. Okay, and after this description of the data, I would like to present our preliminary results based on our interviews. The first interesting thing that we have found concerns the level of intimacy and importance of long relations with friends and political activists. For example, when we ask about political friends, can you say that this is your good friends, or how you communicate? Usually people say, yes, it's a good people, we have lots of topics to discuss, but I don't think that these people can be my friends just now, but maybe a couple of years later we will become good friends. And whereas for being a close friend, it's too important to know these people 10 years or from school, from the university, and communicate in other level of intimacy. And here I would like to present just average proportion of connections between friends and activist friends. Here the first table is about whether my friends know my activists, and the second table is about whether I name my activist friends as my private friends. So, and generally we can see that in average about a third of my friends can know my activists. It's almost the same for all the groups, but a little bit higher for the third group that seems to be more active now. And in the second table, we don't present information about second group because we don't have, unfortunately, data on all the participants, so it's how big, I forgot about it. Nevertheless, and here we just wanted to show that in the first group, people very strongly divide their friendship networks and their networks of political participation, whereas in the third group, that generally this group is located in rather active city. They always try to communicate with citizens, and they don't always divide their friendship or political networks.
And here maybe you will talk about the leader position or later?
Later.
Okay. So, and some just interesting things. Here you can see the quotation from the interview, and what seemed to be important for us, that people consider friends in terms of people who are very close, and that is why when they start to communicate, to discuss politics with them, it is something unnatural, and they often start to be discussing, disputing, maybe almost splitting, but at the same time, finally, and at the same time, of course, they would like to involve friends, because so they would like them as close people to involve in all types of in all kinds of their activity. But finally, what we see that strong times remain strong without politicizing. So the most close friends, even after some disturbances, remain close friend, and people just decide not to trying involve them in politics too actively.
Me or you? Okay. And here we also present just average proportion of friends that participate in any political activity and help to the respondent. Here we asked about two different types of help. We asked whether your friends somehow help in your activity, and then we asked to give an examples. So, and verbal help is like, for example, yes, my friends they believe that I'm doing a good job, but they are not ready yet to do something really. They just like my activity. And real help is usually using some expert knowledge of the friends. For example, if a group has some problems with documents, with some official stuff, or usually people can ask their friends to help. Here, it's interesting that some groups, people from certain groups usually have friends that just say that politics is a good job, but I don't want to participate. And on the other groups, our respondents try to include their private networks in their political networks. And here it's also important to note that there are, of course, in each group different types of people. Some of them are too active, they are too central, they are very popular, and they very good combine the different types of networks. And then, of course, other people, they strongly differentiate different types of connections. For example, I would like to return to this picture. Here, we have a dense cloud of notes here. It's important to note that I think this is one of the most active participants of the group, and she is the chief editor of the local newspaper, and she has lots of friends, about, I don't know, 50 or 20, and different political activists she communicates with, as well as with this one and this one. And all of her private friends know her activists. Whereas, for example, there is a person here that has friends, has political friends, and they are not connected anyhow. Okay, and here it's also some quotations about type of help. It's about for some friends it's enough just to vote for Navalny and not to do anything. And here it's also represents a citation about different types of helps in words and in real deals. Mm-hmm. And yes. Here. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and so and first conclusions. First, because we are now in process of continuing analyzing this data. So, and now we didn't show statistics, but only descriptive things. So, what we can see that still interrelation of friendship and activist networks is quite weak. So it's two different worlds, but in one more successful group, this interrelation is a bit more. But at the same time, in terms of how many from my friends No, my comrades, the interaction is stronger. Then we see that border between friends and comrades is located in the border between words and deeds. So I can easily talk with my friends about politics, and sometimes we was talking by our respondents that so my friends even suggest me how to do it better, so how to win a struggle, but friends don't help them in terms of deeds, so they don't do anything by themselves to help. And the third conclusion, so hypothetical conclusion, that this level of interrelation between private and public networks depends on the position of an activist within the network. So leaders use private networks in their political practice more effectively, more successfully than less popular people than rank and file activists. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's time for questions. Yep.
I think that we should also add these roles to see maybe
Sorry, to add what?
these roles.
With roles.
From the group to see does friendship facilitate civic engagement or industry, first of all. And secondly, it's interesting, it seems to me that it would be interesting to compare it with more group with more experiential sessions. That is, for example, because in these groups, I know from my own experience, friendship and political activity are interconnected very strongly.
Yes.
It depends on, it depends on type of group.
Yes.
In these groups, they are separated, but in a more professionalized group, there's more strong.
Yes, of course.
I really wonder if you did the same research today in England or Scotland or Germany, how different you'd find the relationships within the various protest groups and the role of friendship played. Let me just throw it out as a hypothesis. I know the Howard work. I know the early work that was done on public-private. I think it was actually very good, and I think it said really quite a lot about the situation in Russia in the public sphere, or in the public-private sphere, in the 90s, towards the end of the 90s. I think the economic collapse contributed to strengthening it. But I really do begin to have doubts about whether it's still as relevant today as it was then. I find myself putting more and more emphasis now when I try and analyse what's happening on the lack of experience of collective organising. That seems to me something which never really managed to break through in the 1990s, partly because the Soviet experience did bequeath all the dead organisations. Well, the trade unions continued, didn't they? But one really does wonder why the Writers' Union, why students' unions, and so on, didn't get themselves organised to defend their own collective interests. They didn't. Look at the problem at the moment with the Academy of Sciences. My goodness, did it really need this, the attack from the political authorities, for them to begin to think and act don't lead to rather change the analysis now to get away from the Howard line and the public-private, and begin to think about other things which affect the relationships which exist, and in which respect now are they very similar to relationships that exist in parts of Western society. One thing I've been surprised about, I know the Russian human rights community best of all. When I get colleagues in the British or American human rights community to read what I write about that, they give a great roar of laughter. Mary, they say it's just the same here. Now, that's too simple an answer, but I think we really do need to think again about whether attributes that we have assumed are somehow specifically Russian are, and secondly, whether in fact the situation hasn't changed in quite important respects.
I think that, of course, the situation has changed, and the strong division between private and public is somehow out of date now everywhere. But at the same time, sometimes this strong approach, like Arendt, who distinguishes very strongly, who insists that, so it's two different things, are useful. And in our case, I think what is important that all the activists here, unlike, for instance, social movement Russia, unlike civil rights movement in Russia, they are newcomers, they are first-timers. The most of them in these local movements have the first experience of political activity. And in such cases, in comparison with what we know from Western literature, this maybe not division between private and public, but so we are especially interested in friendship, in personal friendship. So friendship ties still for newcomers are very useless in terms of political engagement and political recruitment. So maybe, but I need to think, and I would agree with many of your points.
Thank you. Thank you for you. And now